Hey fellow YouTubers, this is DanWar850 bringing you episode 4 of Doctor Who A Retrospective. Well, it's come around to that time. We're here to talk about Tom Baker, Doctor Who number 4. What a change, from the seriousness of John Pertwee. Great choice as the Doctor, in everyone's opinion, mine included. I used to love Tom Baker when I was a kid. In fact, Tom Baker was the first Doctor I ever saw when Doctor Who was first released on video back in the mid-80s. I think Revenge of the Cybermen was the first story they released, followed by Pyramids of Mars and Sands of Weng Chiang. I saw the first two and I have to say, loved them. Brilliant. I first noticed Doctor Who when Tom Baker was in fact the Doctor back in 1981. I remember seeing that that episode where the Doctor falls to his death in Logopolis and the Watcher morphs him into Peter Davison. But getting ahead of myself as per usual, let's get back. Well, 1974 to 1981, 7 years, the longest time that anyone has ever played Doctor Who. 7 years, and what a 7 years. Major changes to the programme, great direction, some of the all-time classic stories in there, and absolutely brilliant. That cosmic hobo, Tom Baker, with his long scarf and his jelly babies. What changes were there? Obviously when Tom Baker came into the show, Unit was being wound down and they were using them less and less, weren't they? So when his first opening story, Robot, even though it was an Earth-based story with Unit, you could see the writing was on the wall. The change was there. We first meet Harry Sullivan, who was with him, who played Bryden late, Ian Marter, who stayed with him for the full season, and obviously Sarah Jane Smith, who stayed with him for a couple of years. And you could see the chemistry between all three of them. They worked so well, especially Edith Sleep and Tom Baker. They were brilliant. The next story was The Ark in Space, classic. Saw it again recently on DVD. I've seen a lot of them again recently on DVD. This time with the new improved special effects and CGI. Brilliant. Tom Baker's era contained probably the all-time classic Dalek story, in my opinion. Genesis of the Daleks, where we first meet Davros, the creator of the Daleks on Skaro. Brilliant. The way Tom Baker comes across and handles all the situations when he's having that conversation with Davros, where Davros is interrogating him. He's got him strapped to a chair and the Doctor's telling him about the Daleks' history or future history, from the Doctor's perspective, all the events. And of course he realises he's just got to get that tape back machine back because everything's recorded, and it's just absolutely brilliant. A bloody classic story. It really is brilliant. Whoa, what's happened there? That's better. Sorry about that. And then we had other brilliant stories as well. There are just so many of them. The Terror of the Zygons, the Loch Ness Monster, crap special effects, but it was Doctor Who. You make allowances. It was just a great, enjoyable story. That's the thing about those eras. When you look at Tom Baker's era, he didn't worry about special effects and things like that because the story was enough. He had a great story, a great hero, great scripts, great acting for the most of the time, and they were just brilliant. They were so enjoyable. A real feast. Again, there were stories that I didn't like. I wasn't too keen on The Mask of Mandragora, to be honest with you. I just didn't go on that story. Pyramids of Mars, loved it. Talons of Weng Chiang, I had to see it twice because it was one of those 6-parter, and I was watching it late at night and I was getting a bit sleepy, so I didn't really appreciate it the first time round. A few weeks later I was through on the DVD again, watched it, loved it. It was good. So if you have some of these stories I'm mentioning to you, if you haven't seen them, get the DVD and get them and watch them. You will not be disappointed, I promise. Revenge of the Cybermen, some people have panned it. I personally liked it. Again, it was a quite good concept. The idea that the Cybermen wanted to destroy a planet because obviously it's made of gold. Voga, the planet of gold, feared by Cybermen for obvious reasons. Those who consider Doctor Who fans should know their Doctor Who history. It's like an allergy for the Cybermen. Gold, it affects their breathing apparatus and kills them. Consequently, it was a whole planet of gold. They're going to want to destroy it. And of course, the way they take over the beacon, the space station, was of course they had an agent who had his cybermat, infected everyone that came across with poison and spread like a plague. That was the idea, and they managed to kill a crew off. Only one cybermat killed the entire crew. Amazing, isn't it? But there you go. Tom Baker's era again. It was when Elizabeth Sladen left. I mean, at the time, according to Philip Hinchcliffe, the classic producer of Doctor Who, arguably the best producer the programme's ever had, to be honest with you, in my opinion. Tom Baker kept on to him apparently. He said, do I need a companion? Do I really need somebody? And Philip Hinchcliffe said to him, well, you need someone to be there to help get out of trouble and to ask you questions. That's the whole point. And the only story that Tom Baker didn't have a companion was the deadly assassin when he goes back to Gallifrey. He's caught up in a big conspiracy involving the Master, who is almost a skeleton, is a rotting corpse, a living zombie type creature now. He can't regenerate, he's near the end of his life cycle, and of course he needs the Sasha Rassilon and the energy of the Eye of Harmony to renew himself, and of course obviously the Doctor stops him, but that's the thing. I mean, when the Master falls down that hole, there's enough energy radiating from the Eye, and if the Sasha should have, converted the energy into a new regenerative life cycle, but anyway, that's academic. I mean, it's a story for heaven's sake. I mean, we all know what happened to the Master later on. When he came back in the Keeper of Drakon, he used the Keeper of Drakon powers to take over Tremaz and get himself a new body, and Anthony Ainley took over the role of the Master throughout the rest of the show's history in the 1980s before it was eventually cancelled. There were some parts of Tom Baker's era I didn't like. I like Leela. I thought she had some great stories there. But is it Douglas Adams, Graham Williams? Was it Graham Williams was the producer? He wanted more fun and comical comedy into the programme, and to be honest with you, this thing, some people like the idea of that. I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because I'm finding it very difficult to pan that. I suppose after Philip Hinchcliffe left after 3 years. Again, I mean, there's some stories which I liked. The City of Death, for instance. Again, a classic Doctor Who story. If you haven't seen that, go and get the DVD. I can't emphasise this enough. You've got to see these programmes to really appreciate it. How brilliant the old stories were, minus the budget to back them up. And how lame some of the new stories from the new show are, and poorly written they are. Because at the end of the day, guys, if you haven't got much money, you do rely on the creative talents of the writer and the writing. It's pretty simple, eh? But City of Death was a classic story. I mean, I enjoyed that. Absolutely brilliant. Again, had some perhaps camp moments, had some comedy moments which I felt the show could do without, but on the whole, yeah, I liked it. There were some other shows as well. I mean, Destiny of the Daleks was another one. That was a season opener. I didn't like Destiny of the Daleks, to be honest with you. I didn't really appreciate it. My throat was from it again. The idea of another android race coming at war with the Daleks is an interesting idea, but I don't think it necessarily came across that well in the story. I don't think it was well written. I could be wrong, but that's my opinion at the moment. One season that was really criticised heavily, I think, by fandom, I don't think it was justified, was the fact that you had the whole Key to Time season, didn't you? Which, I mean, as Tom Baker said, you could have a whole season, you could have a story in, say, 4 to 6 episodes, and just move on, but they just dedicated the whole season to it. And again, I didn't like the whole of that season, the Rebus operation, Androids of Tara, I didn't like either. Stones of Blood, did enjoy. The Armageddon Factor, again, did enjoy. And having the Time Lady as your companion, I thought was a great concept. And I think when Mary Tam left at the end of that season, I think Lila Ward was a great choice, who eventually became Mrs. Tom Baker a couple of years later, as you probably know. But yeah, so pros and cons of everything, highs and lows. His last season he didn't like, on the basis they got rid of John Nathan Turner, decided to get rid of K9 and revamp the show, take it into the 1980s. Great visionary. I mean, I think John Nathan Turner did a good job. I think he had the right idea, to be honest with you. A new intro, the music, and revamp the musical score, and the title sequence was changed. Again, pulled it up to date. Great idea. Why not? He'd lost a lot of the humour, which again I think was probably a good idea. He also had the idea of a trilogy story set in East Space, didn't he? What was it now, where we meet Adric for the first time. Worst mistake ever. Thank God they killed Adric off a season later. Should be cruel, but that's my opinion. The East Space trilogy, that was Full Circle, State of Decay, and what's that other one? Warrior's Gate, where Roman was trapped in East Space and the Doctor has to go into normal space to carry on his adventures. Pretty good. Then it had another trilogy where we were reintroduced to the Master, who takes over Treemass. The Master leaves Traken with his new body. He's happy. Then we come into Logopolis, where we meet a future version of the Doctor, don't we? Who's supposed to be, I believe, was supposed to be the Doctor's next future self it's supposed to be the Fifth Doctor, way in the future. And that's why he looks so decayed and ghostly. But apparently he goes back in time and he helps Tom Baker regenerate at the end of Logopolis. Logopolis, I'm not going to dwell on that. That was a bloody awful story, guys. I didn't like it at all. Someone like Tom Baker, after 7 years, you give him Logopolis, he should be ashamed of it. The producer should have been ashamed of himself for allowing a story like that to be commissioned and filmed, and bloody, that was awful. I'm using my words here, I'm getting tired. Great performance, I guess, by Anthony Hanley. Again, sad to see Tom go. I think he had a good regeneration send-off in some respects. The idea of the Doctor falls from a radio telescope, plunges down to his death, and the fact he was still allowed to say farewell was but yeah, I could go on for all night talking about Tom Baker. I'm trying to cram everything into a short time because I'm on a time limit here. I can't give you a full half an hour, which I'd love to do and talk about Tom Baker and his performance and go through his stories, but I just cannot do that. Shame, but there you go. But Tom Baker, you can see why, for many, many people, he is the Doctor. He's so eccentric, funny, he is the Doctor in a lot of people's eyes, and for a long time he was the Doctor in my eyes as well. I loved Tom Baker, I thought he was brilliant. I thought he was the best. No, I'll tell a lie, actually. I grew up with Peter Davison. I actually preferred Peter Davison at the time, but I can see why people love Tom Baker so much. New Doctor Who fans, if you don't think badly of the old series, there were some great stories back then, especially in Tom Baker and John Pertwee eras. Go and get the DVDs and really sit down and watch them and appreciate them for what they are, okay? Anyway, ciao, bye bye.